78% of affairs end in divorce. But for the Anderson family, infidelity led to something far more sinister. This is the story of how a stepfather's dark obsession spiraled into a nightmare of manipulation, fear, and ultimately, murder. From above, the quiet suburban neighborhood of Oakwood Heights seemed like a picture of domestic tranquility. The Anderson residence at 1542 Maple Street blended seamlessly into this idyllic scene, its manicured lawn and cheerful exterior masking the turmoil that simmered within its walls. Robert Anderson, a 45-year-old investment banker, had built a life that many envied. His wife, Sarah, a dedicated elementary school teacher, complemented his ambition with her nurturing nature. Emma, Sarah's 16-year-old daughter from a previous marriage, completed their family portrait. To the outside world, they appeared to have it all. But beneath the surface, tensions were building. Robert's long hours at the office and Sarah's increasing anxiety about her daughter's rebellious behavior were straining their once strong bond. As the days passed, the facade began to crumble, revealing the cracks in their seemingly perfect life. Little did they know, a dark secret was about to shatter their world, leaving a trail of betrayal, violence, and irreparable damage in its wake. As tension mounted in the Anderson household, a dangerous game of seduction and power was about to begin, with consequences more dire than anyone could imagine. Robert Anderson's gaze began to linger where it shouldn't, his eyes following the curves of his stepdaughter Emma, with an intensity that made her both uncomfortable and strangely exhilarated. At 45, Robert was still a handsome man, his salt and pepper hair and piercing blue eyes lending him an air of distinguished authority. But lately, that authority had taken on a predatory edge. Just 16 and blossoming into womanhood, found herself caught in a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. She noticed the way Robert's eyes would follow her as she moved through the house, the way his hand would linger a moment too long when he touched her shoulder. Part of her recoiled at the wrongness of it all, but another part, a part she was ashamed to acknowledge, thrilled at the power she seemed to hold over this successful, commanding man. Sarah, ever the devoted wife and mother, sensed the shifting dynamics in her home, but struggled to put her finger on the cause. She noticed Robert's increased irritability, the way he snapped at her over the smallest things, and Emma, her sweet, once-open daughter, had become sullen and withdrawn, spending more time locked away in her room than ever before. Sarah tried to rationalize these changes, attributing them to work stress and teenage hormones, but a nagging doubt gnawed at the edges of her consciousness. As the days passed, Robert found himself inventing reasons to be alone with Emma. He'd offer to drive her to school, insist on helping with her homework, or suggest family movie nights that inevitably ended with Sarah falling asleep on the couch, leaving stepfather and stepdaughter in charged silence. Each interaction was a delicate dance on the knife's edge of propriety, with meaningful glances and accidental touches building a foundation of unspoken desire. Emma, for her part, vacillated between fear and a heady sense of power. She experimented with wearing more revealing clothing around the house, reveling in Robert's barely concealed reactions. Yet in the dark of night, guilt and shame would wash over her, leaving her tearful and confused. She knew what was happening was wrong, but the attention, so different from the fatherly affection she'd known before, was intoxicating. Sarah's attempts to bridge the growing chasm in her family only seemed to push Robert and Emma closer together. Her suggestions of family outings were met with excuses and eye rolls. Her efforts to connect with Emma were rebuffed with teenage disdain, and her attempts at intimacy with Robert were increasingly rejected, leaving her feeling isolated and bewildered. The tension in the Anderson home reached a breaking point one sultry summer evening. Sarah had been called away to help with a school emergency, leaving Robert and Emma alone in the house. The air was thick with unspoken intentions as they moved around each other in the kitchen, preparing a simple dinner. As Emma reached for a glass in a high cabinet, Robert stepped behind her, his body pressed against hers, as he easily plucked the glass from the shelf. Time seemed to stand still as neither moved away. Emma could feel the heat of Robert's body, smell the expensive cologne he wore. Robert's hand came to rest on Emma's hip, his breath hot on her neck. In that moment, the last vestiges of their stepfather-stepdaughter relationship crumbled away, replaced by a dark, primal attraction that would set in motion a series of events that would shatter their family forever. "Emma," Robert whispered, his voice husky with desire. "We shouldn't," but even as the words left his mouth, his grip tightened, pulling her closer. Emma turned in his arms, her heart racing, torn between the urge to flee and the desire to give in to the forbidden feelings that had been building for months. As Emma and Robert teetered on the brink of crossing an unforgivable line, a complex dance of manipulation and lies was about to begin. What lengths would Robert go to in order to satisfy his desires while maintaining his family's picture-perfect facade? The aftermath of that fateful night in the kitchen set off a chain reaction of deceit that would irreparably damage the Anderson family. Robert, consumed by his illicit desires, began weaving an intricate web of lies to conceal his forbidden relationship with Emma. He fabricated late nights at the office, fictitious business trips, and non-existent client meetings to create opportunities for clandestine encounters with his stepdaughter. Emma, caught in a maelstrom of conflicting emotions, found herself both repulsed and drawn to Robert's advances. The guilt of betraying her mother warred with the intoxicating rush of power she felt in capturing the attention of an older, successful man. She became withdrawn, her once bubbly personality replaced by a sullen, secretive demeanor that left Sarah increasingly concerned and bewildered. As the weeks passed, Robert's manipulation extended beyond creating alibis. He began to plant seeds of doubt in Sarah's mind about Emma's behavior, subtly suggesting that her daughter's moodiness and secrecy were signs of drug use or involvement with a troubled crowd at school. This calculated misdirection served a dual purpose. It deflected suspicion away from Robert while simultaneously isolating Emma from her mother's support. Sarah, desperate to reconnect with her increasingly distant daughter, redoubled her efforts to bridge the growing chasm between them. She suggested mother-daughter outings, tried to engage Emma in conversations about school and friends, and even attempted to plan a family vacation. But each overture was met with thinly veiled contempt from Emma and dismissive indifference from Robert. The strain began to show in Sarah's appearance and demeanor. Dark circles appeared under her eyes, her shoulders hunched with the weight of unspoken worries. She found herself second-guessing every interaction, analyzing offhand comments for hidden meanings, and lying awake at night, trying to pinpoint the moment her family had begun to unravel. Robert, meanwhile, grew bolder in his pursuit of Emma. What had started as furtive glances and accidental touches escalated into passionate encounters in hidden corners of the house. He showered her with expensive gifts, a new phone, designer clothes, even a car for her upcoming 17th birthday, all carefully explained away to Sarah as attempts to mend their fractured relationship. Emma's emotional turmoil intensified with each passing day. The initial thrill of the forbidden affair gave way to a crushing sense of guilt and self-loathing. She began to withdraw from her friends, her grades slipped, and she found herself lying constantly. To her mother, to her teachers, and even to herself about the nature of her relationship with Robert. As Robert's demands on Emma's time and affection grew more insistent, she started to feel trapped. The man who had once made her feel powerful and desirable now inspired a creeping sense of dread. She realized too late that she was in over her head, caught in a web of Robert's making with no clear way out. Sarah's mounting suspicions reached a critical point when she discovered a receipt for an expensive piece of jewelry she had never received. The date on the receipt coincided with a night Robert had claimed to be working late. Her attempts to confront him about the discrepancy were met with a masterful display of gaslighting, leaving Sarah questioning her own sanity and judgment. The tension in the Anderson home reached a fever pitch one crisp autumn evening. Sarah, driven by an inexplicable sense of urgency, returned home early from a teacher's conference. As she pulled into the driveway, she noticed Robert's car parked haphazardly, as if he had arrived in a hurry. The house was eerily quiet as she entered, but a muffled sound from upstairs caught her attention. Heart pounding, Sarah ascended the stairs, her footsteps muffled by the plush carpet. As she approached Emma's bedroom, the sounds became clearer. Hushed voices, a creak of bed springs, a stifled giggle that twisted into a sob. Her hand trembled as she reached for the doorknob, her mind recoiling from the implications of what she might find on the other side. In that moment, poised on the threshold of a truth that would shatter her world, Sarah hesitated. Part of her wanted to turn away, to cling to the comforting lies that had sustained her family for months. But the stronger part, the part that demanded answers and justice, propelled her forward. The moment Sarah crossed that threshold, a chain of events was set in motion that would lead to unthinkable tragedy. As the web of lies unraveled, who would emerge as predator and who as prey? And at what cost would the truth finally come to light? Sarah's hand hovered over the doorknob, her heart pounding in her chest. The sounds from within Emma's room left little doubt about what she would find, yet her mind recoiled from the implications. With a deep breath, she pushed the door open, only to be confronted by a sight that would haunt her for years to come. Robert and Emma sprang apart, their disheveled appearance and guilty expressions confirming Sarah's worst fears. The room fell into a deathly silence, broken only by Sarah's choked sob as she stumbled backward, her world crumbling around her. In the days that followed, the Anderson household became a powder keg of tension and unspoken accusations. Robert, his carefully constructed facade now in tatters, became increasingly paranoid and controlling. He monitored Sarah's every move, intercepting her phone calls and emails, desperate to prevent her from reaching out for help or support. Emma, racked with guilt and shame, retreated further into herself. She made feeble attempts to break free from Robert's toxic influence, but his threats to reveal their affair to her friends and ruin her future kept her trapped in a cycle of fear and compliance. Sarah, meanwhile, found herself caught in a nightmare of gaslighting and manipulation. Robert's silver tongue spun elaborate explanations for what she had witnessed, each more far-fetched than the last. He accused her of imagining things, of letting her insecurities cloud her judgment. But Sarah clung to the truth of what she had seen, even as doubt gnawed at the edges of her sanity. Desperate for answers and validation, Sarah made the difficult decision to hire a private investigator. She withdrew money from her personal savings account, careful to avoid alerting Robert to her plans. The investigator, a former police detective named Frank Malone, listened to Sarah's story with a grim expression, his eyes hardening as she described the suspicious behavior and unexplained absences. As Malone began his investigation, a series of close calls pushed Robert to new heights of paranoia. One afternoon, he nearly collided with the investigator's car while leaving a motel with Emma. Another day, he spotted Malone tailing them at the mall, where he had taken Emma on a shopping spree under the guise of a father-daughter outing. These near misses made Robert increasingly erratic. He installed security cameras around the house, ostensibly for protection, but Sarah suspected they were meant to monitor her movements. He insisted on driving Emma to and from school himself, cutting off her contact with friends and extracurricular activities. Emma's attempts to assert her independence were met with swift and cruel retribution. When she tried to confide in a school counselor, Robert intercepted her after school, his grip on her arm painfully tight as he reminded her of the consequences of betrayal. "You think anyone would believe you?" he hissed. "You're just as guilty as I am. If I go down, you're coming with me." Sarah watched helplessly as her daughter withdrew further, dark circles forming under her eyes and her once vibrant spirit dimming day by day. She redoubled her efforts to gather evidence, meeting Malone in secret to review his findings. The breakthrough came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. Malone presented Sarah with a folder containing undeniable proof of Robert's infidelity and manipulation. Credit card statements showed lavish gifts purchased for Emma. Hotel receipts confirmed their clandestine meetings. And most damning of all, a series of photographs captured their illicit encounters. Sarah's hands shook as she leafed through the evidence, her mind reeling from the extent of Robert's betrayal. The man she had loved, the man she had built a life with, had not only violated her trust, but had preyed upon her vulnerable daughter. Sarah's call to the police set in motion a chain of events that would end in bloodshed. But who would emerge as the victim? and who as the perpetrator. The lines between protector and aggressor were about to blur in ways no one could have anticipated. As Sarah ended the call, her hands trembling, she heard the front door slam. Robert's voice echoed through the house, calling for Emma. Sarah's heart raced as she realized she had mere moments before her husband discovered her betrayal. She tucked the damning folder of evidence into her waistband, concealing it beneath her loose-fitting blouse. Emma appeared at the top of the stairs, her face a mask of fear and uncertainty. Robert's footsteps grew louder as he ascended, his jovial facade cracking with each step. "Emma, sweetheart, where are you? I thought we could go for a drive." Sarah positioned herself between Emma and Robert, her voice steady despite her inner turmoil. "She's not going anywhere with you, Robert. It's over. I know everything." Robert's eyes narrowed, darting between Sarah and Emma. The mask of the loving husband and stepfather slipped away, revealing the predator beneath. "What exactly do you think you know, Sarah?" His tone was low, dangerous. "I know about the affair, the manipulation, the gifts," Sarah spat, her voice rising. "I know how you've been abusing our daughter." Emma flinched at the word abuse, tears welling in her eyes. Robert's face contorted with rage, his carefully constructed world crumbling around him. "You have no idea what you're talking about," he snarled, advancing on Sarah. Sarah stood her ground, drawing strength from the need to protect her daughter. "The police are on their way, Robert. It's time to face the consequences of your actions." The mention of police ignited something primal in Robert. He lunged forward, grabbing Sarah's arm with bruising force. "You stupid bitch," he hissed. "You've ruined everything!" Emma screamed, the sound piercing the tension-filled air. Sarah struggled against Robert's grip, her free hand reaching for the folder. As she pulled it out, Robert's eyes widened in recognition. He released Sarah's arm, making a grab for the incriminating evidence. In the ensuing struggle, the contents of the folder spilled across the floor. Credit card statements, hotel receipts, and damning photographs scattering like leaves in a storm. Emma's anguished cry cut through the chaos as she saw the physical proof of her own exploitation. Robert's focus shifted to the evidence, giving Sarah a moment to catch her breath. She turned to Emma, desperation in her eyes. "Run, Emma! Get out of the house, now!" Emma hesitated, torn between fear and a misplaced sense of loyalty to Robert. Her stepfather seized the moment of indecision, grabbing her arm and pulling her close. "Tell her, Emma," he demanded, his voice a mixture of pleading and threat. "Tell her it was all consensual, that you wanted it too." Sarah watched in horror as Emma's resolve wavered, years of manipulation taking their toll. In that moment, Sarah realized the true extent of the damage Robert had inflicted on their family. With a surge of maternal protectiveness, she charged at Robert, determined to free her daughter from his grasp. The three bodies collided in a tangle of limbs and raw emotion. They tumbled down the stairs, a cacophony of shouts and thuds echoing through the house. At the bottom, they lay stunned, the air thick with tension and the metallic scent of blood. Sarah was the first to stir, her vision blurring as she took in the scene. Robert lay motionless, a crimson pool spreading beneath his head where it had struck the corner of the coffee table. Emma huddled against the wall, her eyes wide with shock. As sirens wailed in the distance, Sarah crawled to her daughter, gathering her in her arms. "It's over, baby," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "It's finally over." The next few moments passed in a haze of flashing lights and urgent voices. Paramedics rushed in, their faces grim as they assessed Robert's condition. Police officers swarmed the house, securing the scene and separating Sarah and Emma for questioning. As dawn broke over Oakwood Heights, the idyllic facade of 1542 Maple Street lay in ruins. Yellow crime scene tape fluttered in the morning breeze, a stark contrast to the manicured lawns and picket fences of the neighboring homes. Neighbors gathered in hushed clusters, their faces a mixture of shock and morbid curiosity. As the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the crime scene, detectives arrived to peel back the layers of deception within the Anderson household. What sinister secrets would come to light as they unraveled the complex web of relationships that led to this tragic end? Detective Frank Malone, the former private investigator hired by Sarah, stood on the front lawn of 1542 Maple Street, watching as crime scene technicians bustled in and out of the house. His face was grim as he briefed the lead investigator, Detective Lisa Chen, on the events that had led to this moment. Inside, the house had become a hive of activity. Forensic specialists meticulously documented every detail, from the scattered papers at the foot of the stairs to the blood spatter on the coffee table. The air was thick with the acrid smell of luminol and the constant click of camera shutters. Detective Chen's keen eyes scanned the scene, her mind piecing together the fragments of evidence. "We've got a complex situation here," she murmured to her partner. "A dead stepfather, a traumatized teenager, and a mother caught in the middle. Nothing's going to be straightforward about this one." As the investigation unfolded, a disturbing picture began to emerge. The forensic analysis of Robert's phone revealed a trove of inappropriate messages and photos exchanged with Emma, dating back nearly a year. The timestamps on these messages corroborated Sarah's account of Robert's increasing absence from family life. The interrogation room at the police station became a crucible of truth and deception. Emma, still in shock, struggled to provide a coherent account of her relationship with Robert. Her words came in fits and starts, punctuated by long silences and sudden outbursts of tears. "He said he loved me," Emma whispered, her voice barely audible. "Said I was special. Not like the other girls my age. I knew it was wrong, but I didn't know how to make it stop." Sarah's interrogation was equally heart-wrenching. She recounted the months of gaslighting and manipulation, the growing distance between her and Emma, and the moment she discovered the truth. Her voice shook as she described the final confrontation. "I just wanted to protect my daughter," Sarah said, her eyes pleading for understanding. "I never meant for anyone to get hurt. I just wanted it to end." As the investigators dug deeper, they uncovered a trail of evidence that painted a damning picture of Robert's predatory behavior. Credit card statements revealed a pattern of lavish gifts for Emma, always carefully disguised as family expenses. Hotel receipts confirmed clandestine meetings, often coinciding with Robert's supposed business trips. Most disturbing of all were the entries in Emma's diary, discovered hidden beneath a loose floorboard in her room. The pages chronicled her internal struggle, the confusion and guilt warring with a misplaced sense of love and loyalty to Robert. The words of a child grappling with adult manipulation were heartbreaking in their rawness. Detective Chen sat at her desk, poring over the mounting evidence. The case had taken an emotional toll on even the most seasoned investigators. It wasn't just the physical evidence that painted a picture of long-term abuse and manipulation. It was the psychological scars that ran deep in both Emma and Sarah. "We're dealing with years of grooming here," Chen explained to her team. "Robert systematically isolated Emma, made her dependent on his approval, and he gaslit Sarah every step of the way, making her doubt her own perceptions." As the investigation progressed, the community of Oakwood Heights reeled from the revelations. Neighbors who had once envied the Andersons' seemingly perfect life now grappled with the knowledge that darkness had lurked behind closed doors. The case sparked difficult conversations about the nature of abuse and the importance of recognizing its subtle signs. The evidence gathered painted a complex picture of victim and perpetrator, blurring the lines between justice and tragedy. It raised uncomfortable questions about the nature of consent, the long-term effects of manipulation, and the lengths to which a mother would go to protect her child. The legal system of Oakwood Heights found itself facing an unprecedented challenge as the Anderson case moved to trial. How could justice be served when the lines between victim and perpetrator were so inextricably blurred? The answers would shake the community to its core and force a reckoning with the darkness that had festered behind closed doors. As the trial date approached, the prosecution grappled with the complexities of the case. Robert Anderson's death complicated matters, leaving Sarah to face charges of manslaughter. The district attorney's office, however, recognized the extenuating circumstances and the years of abuse that had led to the fatal confrontation. The courtroom buzzed with tension as the trial began. Neighbors who had once envied the Andersons' seemingly perfect life now sat in stunned silence as the details of Robert's predatory behavior came to light. Emma's testimony, delivered via closed-circuit television to spare her the trauma of facing a courtroom, left many in tears. Her halting words painted a picture of manipulation and grooming that had robbed her of her childhood. Sarah's defense team argued passionately that her actions were those of a mother desperate to protect her child. They presented evidence of Robert's gaslighting and manipulation, showing how he had systematically isolated both Sarah and Emma, creating a web of dependence and fear. The prosecution, while acknowledging the abuse, argued that Sarah had taken the law into her own hands. They questioned why she hadn't sought help sooner and suggested that her actions on that fateful night had gone beyond self-defense. As the trial progressed, the community of Oakwood Heights found itself divided. Some rallied behind Sarah, seeing her as a protective mother pushed to the brink. Others grappled with the complexity of the situation, struggling to reconcile the charming neighbor they thought they knew with the monster revealed in court. Expert witnesses took the stand, explaining the insidious nature of grooming and the long-term psychological effects of abuse. They highlighted how predators like Robert often targeted not just their primary victim, but worked to manipulate entire families and social circles. The jury deliberated for 3 days, wrestling with the moral and legal implications of the case. When they finally returned, the courtroom held its collective breath. Sarah was found guilty of manslaughter, but with a strong recommendation for leniency given the circumstances. The judge, in her sentencing statement, addressed the heart-wrenching nature of the case. This court has rarely seen a situation that so starkly illustrates the devastating consequences of secrets and betrayal within a family, she said. While the law compels me to assign a punishment for the taking of a life, I cannot ignore the years of abuse and manipulation that led to this tragedy. Sarah was sentenced to 5 years, with the possibility of parole after serving 2. The judge also mandated extensive therapy and counseling for both Sarah and Emma, recognizing the deep trauma they had endured. As news of the verdict spread, Oakwood Heights grappled with its implications. The case had forced the community to confront uncomfortable truths about the nature of abuse and the importance of vigilance. Support groups sprang up, and the local school board implemented new programs to educate students and parents about recognizing signs of grooming and manipulation. For Emma, the road to recovery stretched out before her, long and daunting. With her mother incarcerated, she found herself in the care of her maternal grandmother, struggling to rebuild a sense of normalcy. Therapy sessions helped her begin to untangle the complex web of emotions surrounding her relationship with Robert and the traumatic events that had unfolded. Sarah, from behind prison walls, worked tirelessly to repair her relationship with Emma. Through supervised visits and carefully monitored correspondence, mother and daughter began the painful process of healing and forgiveness. The aftermath of the Anderson case left an indelible mark on Oakwood Heights. Neighbors who had once prided themselves on their close-knit community now grappled with feelings of guilt and shame. How had they missed the signs? Could they have intervened? The case sparked difficult but necessary conversations about the responsibility of communities to look out for their most vulnerable members.